Hey there, Kings! I have a special treat for you. Back on March 3rd, our local community organized a Pauper tournament, and I played in it and was able to record my games. In this tournament, I am playing Moggwarts, which is a goblin combo deck that tries to create infinite mana and find a game-winning line. Now, in this first round game, I played against Dan piloting Boros Synthesizer. This is an artifact synergy deck that gains value and abuse effects from powerful artifacts. Dan won the die roll, going first. We both decided to keep our opening 7, now let the games begin. Dan plays a secluded step and passes the turn. I play a Forge Bridge and pass the turn. Dan plays a mountain and casts Thraben Inspector. He creates a clue token and passes the turn. I cast a Duress, revealing 3 Galvanic Blasts, a Lightning Bolt, and a Core Skyfisher. I take the bolt and play another Forge Bridge and pass the turn. Dan plays a Core Skyfisher, bouncing the Thraben Inspector. He then plays a Boros Garrison, bouncing the mountain to his hand and passes the turn. I play a Bajuka Bog, exiling Dan's graveyard and pass the turn. Dan replays the mountain. He then recasts the Thraben Inspector, making a second treasure token. Dan then casts a Glinthawk and chooses to return a clue token back to his hand. He then casts a Galvanic Blast, dealing 2 damage to me, and attacks with the Core Skyfisher, leaving me at 16 life. He passes the turn, but during his end step, I cast First Day of Class. With its Learn ability, I grab Introduction to Prophecy from the sideboard, and the turn is now mine. During my turn, I cast Introduction to Prophecy. I scry 2 cards to the bottom and draw a card. I play a Great Furnace and pass the turn. On Dan's turn, he attacks me with both his creatures, dropping me to 11 life. He passes the turn. I play a Swamp for the turn. I cast Goblin Matron and search for a Skirk Prospector and pass the turn. Dan plays a Plains for the turn and attacks me with everything. I block the Thraben Inspector. Before damage, I cast Deadly Dispute, sacrificing the Goblin Matron to draw 2 cards and make a treasure token. I take the remaining 4 damage, going down to 7 life. Dan passes the turn. I cast Duress, revealing 2 Galvanic Blast and a Dawnbringer Cleric. I take a copy of Galvanic Blast. I play a Swamp for the turn. I cast Unearth, targeting the Goblin Matron. When it re-enters, I search for a Flamewake Invoker from the deck and pass the turn. Dan plays Windscarred Crag and gains a life. Dan attacks with all his creatures and I block the Thraben Inspector again, taking 4, going to 3. He passes the turn, but during his end step, I cycle Unearth to draw a card. I play a Mountain for the turn. I sacrifice the treasure token to cast Faithless Looting, drawing 2 cards and discarding Unearth and Dark Dweller Oracle. I go for the combo. I first cast the Skirk Prospector. I then cast First Day of Class. With its Learn trigger, I grab another copy of Introduction to Prophecy from outside the game. I then cast Putrid Goblin, and because of First Day of Class, it gets a +1/+1 counter. I sacrifice Putrid Goblin to the Prospector, adding a red mana. When the Goblin dies, its Persist trigger goes on the stack, and it enters with a -1/-1 counter. I demonstrate the loop to Dan and explain the way counters work, and whenever I sacrifice a Putrid Goblin to the Prospector, it keeps coming back to the battlefield, and I add an arbitrarily large amount of red mana. I then cast Flamewake Invoker. I activate its ability once, dealing 5 damage to Dan. In response, he casts Galvanic Blast, attempting to kill it. I explain that with all the generated mana I made, I can continually activate the Invoker's ability to deal 5 damage over and over, burning him out from 3 life. We then move to sideboarding with stuff coming in and stuff going out. You know how that goes. Dan chooses to go first for game 2. Dan keeps a 7, but I need to mulligan, leaving me at 6 cards in hand. Dan plays a Great Furnace and casts Lightning Bolt, dealing 3 damage to me. Dan passes the turn. I play a Great Furnace and cast Skirk Prospector. I pass the turn. Dan plays a Plains and casts Core Skyfisher, returning the Plains to his hand. He passes the turn. I play a Rakdos Carnarium, returning the Great Furnace to my hand, passing the turn. Dan replays the plains and casts an experimental synthesizer. With its Enter the Battlefield trigger, he reveals a Core Skyfisher. He then attacks me for 2, dropping me to 15. With not enough mana to cast the Skyfisher, he passes the turn. I replay the Great Furnace and pass the turn. Dan plays the Rustvale Bridge for the turn. He then casts the Krark Clan Shaman and attacks for 2, leaving me at 13. He passes the turn. But during his end step, I cast Deadly Dispute, sacrificing the Great Furnace for its additional cost. This draws me 2 cards and I get a treasure token. The turn goes to me now. I cast Duress and Dan reveals 3 lands, and I pass the turn. Dan plays a Galvanic Blast, dealing 4 to me and attacks me with the Core Skyfisher, leaving me at 7 and passes the turn. Still missing lands, I start attacking his board. I cast Into the Fire, dealing 1 damage to the Krark Clan Shaman and the Core Skyfisher. In response, he sacrifices the Synthesizer to the Shaman's ability, dealing 1 damage to each creature without flying. The Synthesizer's Leaves the Battlefield trigger goes on the stack, and he reveals a Foundry Helix. We resolve the Shaman's ability, killing itself and the Prospector. At this point, we put the Skyfisher and Helix that we flipped from the Synthesizer into exile, as they were not cast. After all this, I pass the turn back. Dan plays another land, and he casts Ichor Wellspring and draws a card. He casts Lembas, he scries 1 to the bottom and draws a card. He attacks me for 2, leaving me at 5 life and passes the turn. I cast a Future Goblin and I pass the turn. Dan plays a Great Furnace. He casts Glinthawk and returns Ichor Wellspring to his hand and replays it again. He attacks me, dropping me down to 3 and passes the turn. I draw and play a Vault of Whisper for the turn. I cast Unearth, returning the Prospector to the battlefield. I cast First Day of Class, and with its Learn ability, I rummage away a First Day of Class. I demonstrate the loop of sacrificing the Goblin and make a large amount of red mana. I then cast Makeshift Munitions, which is an enchantment I can pay 1 and sacrifice an artifact or creature to deal 1 damage to any target. I show the loop of sacrificing the Putrid Goblin to the Makeshift Munitions and burn him out for lethal, winning the game. It's crazy how in both games I was on the verge of death. One lesson learned here is that certain decks need to learn how to apply pressure. Since I was playing a combo deck, my opponent needs to pressure a resource, whether it's the cards in my hand or the creatures on my field, or even my life total. I can't combo off without any resources. But what did you think of the game? Were you Team Goblins or Team Synthesizer? Let me know with a like, a comment, or a subscribe. It really helps me make more gameplay videos. But with that being said, I'll see you kings in the next one.